Okay, so what I wanted to talk about today was specifically using the Microsoft Suite to file documents either into eDrawer or into PinPoint. Now, I know we talk about eDrawer and PinPoint as far as version 6 of eDrawer and PinPoint 2997 or whatever version you might be on, but if you're on eDrawer 6 or on PinPoint, you're on one and the same. So when we talk about eDrawer, I'm really talking about eDrawer 5 or less, and because let me mention this, that when a document files into the system, if you are having the system automatically do that for you, if you're on the older version of eDrawer, that's called EAR for the eDrawer Automated Robot, or under PinPoint, it's called ARI just for the Automated Robot, Integration Explorer. So if I mention the word ARI, I'm talking about eDrawer 6 or PinPoint. If I say EAR, I'm talking about eDrawer 5 or before that. Okay? But again, the tool's going to work the same way. Now, I wanted to start out by mentioning here, I wanted to start out by mentioning here that what you'll be able to do is to simply download the file. And if you'll notice here, I've gone out to the web page. And if you go under Customer Portal on our lsspdocs.com page and go to Customer Portal, you could click on the Downloads and Drivers. By the way, if you don't remember, there's a password when you click on the Customer Portal to get to that screen, and you should have that, but if you don't, let me know. Also here, when I click on Downloads and Drivers, you'll notice that there is a driver here for downloading MS add-ins. You'll notice that when I move my cursor over it right now, it doesn't highlight. That's because we're pushing it up right now, but we wanted to make sure everybody has the most current version, so those guys are doing it, and it should be done probably by the time we're done with the class. But this is where you'll go, and when you hover over this one, you'll click on it. Now, what will happen is, obviously, it'll download. So that's what I did. I did it just a few minutes ago and let it download, and so I'm going to open up the folder, and here is the file that came down. It is a zip file. That zip file has 4 different folders in there. So when you download this, you should have a zip file. If you were to click on it to open it, excuse me, there's the folder, and when I double click again, here's the 4 folders that you'll see within. Now, there is no password on this file, so even if you're using your standard Windows system like I am, I can hit extract here and extract those to a folder. And so that's what I'll do. I'm going to extract those, and I'm just going to drag this over here so that we can see it. And I'm going to create a new one called, I'll just call it outbound, meaning that this is the outbound files that it creates. So I'm going to extract that. And now I have a new folder. Oh, there it was. I'm sorry. Outbound. So, in other words, unzip the files, and you'll have a set of folders. Each of these, if you open them, will have 2 files, an MSI or an EXE. You can use either the MSI or the EXE. I usually use the EXE. And so I would just double click on this to run this. Now, I've installed them already, but when you do install this, you'll notice I'm in Outlook right now. So as you do these, you could do any of these that you want to do. Do not have the application open at that time. If you do, nothing happens, but like if I installed it and I had Outlook open, it wouldn't show up until I closed out and came back in, but I suggest and recommend close out of them before you install these. So if I was going to do Word next, for example, I would do the same thing. I would double click on this, and I'm not going to run the whole thing here, but when it comes to this screen, I could say More Info, and then Run Anyway. These applications are from us. That's the normal Windows thing now, unless you put it into Microsoft and wait a whole bunch of times. So all you would do is just run, and then it'll prompt you from there. It'll prepare, and then here, I already installed it, so I'm not going to really run this, but you would just be prompted to just go ahead and let it install. Now, when you're done with that, one of the things, let me make sure I end that. Installation did not close. You need to restrict. Okay, so I would install the ones that I want. I don't have to install any of them, obviously, if we're not using it, but obviously you're here to at least, you must use one, meaning that you want to use it at least for one thing. Okay, so that's installing them. They're really quick, though. It's just kind of next, 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 and it's done. You don't really have to answer anything. And let's say that I put it into Outlook now. Okay, so when I put this into Outlook, I'm going to open this up. And this button appears here now that I had run that application. Now, when I click on this, these will be normally blank. There'll be no information in these fields. In other words, content named and all this would be blank, but I've already filled mine out. If I was in Word, I want to bring up Word side by side of this, only because, or next to it, I should say, because in here, you will also notice there is a PinPoint button. But one of the things that you'll notice when I hit this button is that it's a little bit different on the wording, and that's what I want to talk about. In other words, you don't check in a document from Word. I'm sorry, I apologize, that was really bad. You don't check in a file from Outlook because you're not versioning emails. So when I hit PinPoint here and I see check in, on Outlook, I do not see that, but I'm going to go over Word. But when I go over Word, that will be the exact same whether I was in Word, whether I was in Excel. Here is one that I hadn't filled out yet, and that's why I was going to use this in a few moments to fill it out. But I'll come back to that shortly. So I've run the 4 different applications to install it into all 4 of my Outlook, Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. Okay, now, let's pretend this is the first time you're clicking on the box, and there's nothing in it, just like there wasn't with that Excel, but I wanted to do Outlook first. So I want to explain this to you. When this screen comes up, you will need to be aware of, and you might have to work with the IT person or whoever sets up your EAR or ARI paths. What do I mean by EAR or ARI paths? When a document gets put into the system can file it automatically. For example, if I was to close this here, and I'm going to open up this, and I'm going to open up a file right here, a folder, I apologize. So I have some document that I want to file. If I were to take this file and just put it in here, then if I keep my eye on this, or just every once in a while I'll peek, but I have a watched or hot folder that either EAR or ARI is monitoring. Okay, so I'll come back to that, but let's go back to where we were at in Outlook. Now, I'm ready to set up a brand new path to file my documents in Outlook. When I click on this, again, I would have nothing filled out here, but what I would do is I would click on Setup, and here is where I would fill out the information. Now, here is where you have to know something about EAR or ARI. EAR can file documents in only a couple of ways, but it can file it based on named files. And if you're familiar with, I'll say old eDrawer, when I say that I mean 5 or below, because in eDrawer, you can have a file that you save. And let's pretend I am not in eDrawer, but if I literally said file, and again, I'm not doing this with the button, but I just wanted to show this to you. If I say save as, and I were to save this file somewhere, I could name it with the eDrawer. We have plus signs between what we call the drawer and the folder. So if I were to show you eDrawer right now, one of the things that you would see is a drawer and folder. And if you've ever filed a document from or to eDrawer by putting in the plus signs, it is the same thing as what named is in PinPoint. I'll show you an example of what the file looks like and what I mean by this shortly. Now, content is meaning that it's going to file the document based on the words within either the attachment or the email itself, or both. Because what you'll notice at the bottom, excuse me, is what do you want to save to PinPoint? And let me explain these two first, and then this one. if I saved emails, the text file, or this portion right here, all of this down here, this would be saved as a text file. Now, there are no attachments in that one, but let's just say, here's, let me cancel out of that one first. But let's say I went into here, and now I pick this. So right now, if I were to actually take this and go back to setup, do I want to save the attachments? Maybe I only want to save the email. Maybe I only want to save the attachments. If you save the attachments, they will save as is. So I have a PDF and a Word file. Excuse me. So if I were to have these two boxes checked, and I'm going to, this is in setup now, remember, so I'm going to save those as a setup. Let's say that I filed a document right now. When I hit this button, we're going to go look at what those files, or where they went. They went out here. Let me close so I can show you this. And these are the files ready to go. It's going to send this Word file, this PDF, and then here's the text file, which was the email that went across. Okay? So that would be one example. Another example would be, I'll close. Oh, that document was gone. Shoot, I meant to show you that. But if you noticed, when I was there, that document that I had dragged over is gone. That's because that is where ERI or EAR would pick up the file and file it. But let's go back here once again. When I hit this PinPoint button, the other thing I could do is save a document as an MSG file. And even as these two. Let's say you were saving it as an MSG file. I'm going to save that. And I'm going to exit this. And let's say I wanted to file that one again. So I say file it. Now, because I have MSG, though, saved there, you'll notice that the file created an MSG file. This MSG file, if I load that into PinPoint or eDrawer, I really can't look at much, because to open it, you have to, in PinPoint, you have to launch it. And just like in eDrawer, you would have to launch it. But if you look at this, if I click on it to open it, it opened on my other screen. Here it is. It's basically the email encapsulated with all of the stuff, meaning the MSG file opened up under Outlook, because that's what it knows to use as the native application. So I wanted to mention that because when you do set up your file, files that you want to save in your email, or from your email, I apologize. What you might want to do is realize what type of files, because some people want that. Maybe you only want the attachments. Now, let's continue on. Content normally is going to go to what we call a native folder. If you're not familiar in ERI, you can process, and this is something that eDrawer doesn't have, but in ERI, it can file a document intact by looking at the first page. And if I wanted to file a document, meaning the email, the text file, and if there were attachments, if I were out on this screen right here, and I hit this button, I would normally save this to a different path where I'm going to file native files as an example, or wherever. Oops, I'm going to go to my drive here. Let's say I wanted to file those to, I'll just let them just stay there. So I could have those go to a certain folder. Now, the difference between these three when you file. Content is assuming you want to file this as a native file into a folder that will look at the native rules in PinPoint, or as the Smart Scan rule in eDrawer, to look at the content to figure out where to file it. The second way, and by the way, I could click on any of these. Named. What does named mean? Named means that, let's say I want to put this in a folder, and we do not have a link attaching me to drill down, but if I was in PinPoint or eDrawer, I could be cutting and pasting, and let's say I wanted to go into the folder of Smith and the subdivider of invoices as an example. When I hit the button, this one now, notice how it saved the file. And I'll explain, oops, I gotta close this one. I'll show you what I mean by that. If I open where that file just went, see these with the plus sign? These with the plus sign, if you remember, I typed in that. So here's what I would end up with. The system, when you set this up in Outlook, normally you're going to have this go to a certain folder that is associated to a cabinet. I know this is extremely hard to understand, but here's where I'm going with it. If you've ever set up ARI rules, you will know that you can set up what's called named rules to accept these, but I have to tell them where they're coming from so it knows what cabinet it's going into. Because if you'll notice here, this file, it doesn't have a cabinet plus sign folder, plus sign subdivider, plus sign name of the document. In other words, when our system gets this, the system will say, he told me that in that path, I'm going to be filing documents into clients. So it is going to look for a client folder called Smith and a subdivider called invoices, and it's going to file in a title of a document unless you have it override to this name, and it will be a Word file in the system. I'm sure that's confusing for you, for those of you that aren't familiar with ARI or EAR, but if you are and you've used the naming means in either of those, they are separated by plus signs to separate what we call an E-drawer, the drawer, then the folder, then the document name. In PinPoint, based on the path you're in, it's going to go to a cabinet, to the folder of that cabinet, to the subdivider, to that document name. If you do not have that, like if this was a client cabinet, if that client does not exist, the system can, if you want it to, based on configuration, create that folder for you. So it can automatically create a cabinet, create a folder on the way in. Now, if I go back to here, there was one other choice I had called direct. And you'll notice all these paths are the same, which they really wouldn't be for you, but because I'm using this so I can just simply show you quickly where they are, these would normally be different because our system handles these in different ways. So if you're not familiar with ARI, please ask who has ARI or who is familiar with ARI, but you could set up direct rules in ARI as well. Well, what does that mean? Well, if I have a path, let's say it goes to a specific path, and that path then is defined in PinPoint. E-drawer doesn't have this, but PinPoint, that if anything hits that folder, it's going to go specifically into a folder in PinPoint. So in other words, if I were to hit that box, this button, based on this path, that is defined in PinPoint as a direct rule, which says, okay, I'm watching that path. If anything comes in, you have in there specifically what cabinet, what folder, and what subdivider to put it in. Such as if I had an inbox, or in my, I'll just bring it up, in my PinPoint as an example, okay, so if I was in the system though, and I was, say for example, I'm going to switch and go to this screen, we might have personal folders in here where maybe I work for one of these people or we work together or whatever, so we kind of share things, but I have a rule in there, or the administrator set up for me, that when I hit that button in Outlook, it's going to put them right into this folder because I have my emails come directly in here because maybe I'm going to look at them and then determine where I'd like to move those to, because I can move those quickly by just being right in that particular folder. You know, if I wanted to move this quickly, I could just be looking at the document even, and as I look at it, I can determine, oh, this isn't the right folder, this should have gone to, and maybe this should have been in a, I'll just say it's an employee folder. So I look in here and I go, oh, it should be there at that spot. By saving it, that document is quickly put into that spot for me. So it's not real painful to just say, hey, I'm going to just, because I don't know where I want to put this yet, maybe I want to file it this time. So I can use any combination of these at any time. So one I might file one way, one I might file another, and so forth. Okay? Now, everything else from here is really going to be quick because of the fact that based on that, if you were in Word, you have a different item instead based on that in Outlook, you don't check in files. So in here, I haven't set any paths up yet. If I was ready to set up my paths, I would hit Setup. And I would start browsing. So let's say I want to take my content, and again, I'm making this up as I go, but as an example, desktop. I thought I had some subfolders in there, but I guess I don't. But if I did have my subfolders in there, oh, let me just do this. I'll just say content or native. I like to use the word native because I know then it stands for where it's going. So let's say that I have anything when I hit that button is going to go to the folder called native as an example. Maybe, again, I'm making this up, but maybe I have a folder. Once again, this has to correlate with ARI. But if I was here right now, I'm going to make one more folder called, check-in. Okay. So, and then I might as well, I'll just pick right to where one spot was. And direct would go to, maybe it would be here, but I have a folder for myself called PC or something. Okay. So I've configured it now, and I'm ready to go, meaning that if my intent was to check in a document right now under here, meaning I've checked it out of PinPoint, and I'm ready to check it in, I would hit this button. I have a path here that's different than the others because that's how our system knows what to do or how to handle it. Okay? So now you might have shared paths, so maybe somewhere on a server, we all save to a what I'll just call a folder, which is a shortcut on my desk, and it removes it when it's done. So if this was an existing file, I would hit check-in as an example, and it would check it in. If I wanted to file it based on just the name of the file, I could hit that button to file it. If I wanted to put it into a specific folder, I'm going to put Quincy, and we'll put contract. I would just now fill that in and hit that button. If I wanted to directly, meaning that I have a setup in ARI that says anything that goes to that path is going right into the system. And by the way, don't try setting these up without, if you're on the cloud, because we have the path, you're actually pointing to kind of a spot where you have saved on the local drive on the server. So talk to us ever before you ever set up any of this so you're familiar with how that works or attend an ARI class. But if I wanted to file that directly, I could hit that button as well. So whether I was doing Word, whether I was doing Excel, you'll see you can check in, content named, or direct, meaning those are different ways that they go into the system. Check-in is not in Outlook because, again, that isn't part of an email. At that point, we just have the three choices. You do have setup for all of those. By clicking on them, you can change the path. In Outlook, you do have the additional checkboxes of what type of file you would like it to save as well. You'll see in the outcome of all of this, from all of these that I've just done, here we've created, like in here we had some folders that we're going to file. Here was the one we were going to file by like the name, for example. So it filed it in by, here's the folder within the cabinet that was defined, the subdivider, and the name of the file. So native, anything that we had done or clicked on, check in, there's the one we checked in, and you can see some of those other ones that we had done earlier as well. So with that, I'm basically finished with this portion. I'm going to stop the recording at this time and then see if you have any questions that I can answer.